One book changed my financial life. One person has had the biggest impact on the financial trajectory of millions of people. And one book changed the lives and bank accounts of countless families. Today on the podcast, we are thrilled to have the author of The Wealthy Barber, Dave Chilton. Hi there, and welcome to The Heart of It All, brought to you by RBC Wealth Management, a podcast all about caregiving. I'm your host, Teri Hart. We are diving back into the financial conversation today with one of the best to ever do it. Caring for your parents or eventually yourself isn't just an emotional journey. It can quietly reshape your entire financial life. Health, family dynamics, cognitive changes. It all connects, and it all matters. RBC Wealth Management is helping clients plan for the longer run with confidence, resilience, and purpose by integrating financial expertise with a deeper understanding of aging, health, and family dynamics. This focus is driven by a commitment to what matters to clients, preparing for the complexities of aging with clarity and compassion. It's one of the reasons they've partnered with experts in caregiving and wellness, including cognitive health. Because the earlier you have these conversations, the better. Having the right people in place at the right time matters for both your wealth and your health. The financial decisions you make throughout your life come to roost in your retirement years, and those years are becoming longer. Lifespans are growing, and health spans aren't necessarily keeping up. Our planning needs to start including those years that we will probably need care. Or that's what I believe. And maybe Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z are going to be helping to financially take care of their parents who maybe didn't plan for these expenses. There are two things that had the biggest impact on my personal financial trajectory: my dad teaching me about TFSAs and the book, The Wealthy Barber. Like millions of Canadians, I did my best to employ the strategies that author Dave Chilton laid out in that book, and I am so much better off for it. Well, Dave Chilton himself is now retiring, and the man who has been advising people on finances since The Wealthy Barber was first published in 1989 is with us today. Dave, welcome so much to The Heart of It All.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've heard good things about the podcast, so it's nice to be here.
Oh, that's so kind. Congrats on your retirement decision. I think you took a lot of people by surprise with that decision. You even said that people thought you were never going to retire. And, you've spent decades teaching people to plan for that future. And here you are now in that future yourself. How does all that advice hold up?
Well, I mean, financially, I followed my own advice and everything is good there. I probably didn't do a good job following the advice to do a lot of thinking about retirement and the transition, et cetera. I made a bit of a snap decision, I'd say 2 months ago, to step away at the end of the year. I mentioned in the video I put out that I have a lot of sick friends. They're battling health issues that made me reassess. You think about your own mortality, but more, I wanted to spend more time with them. And because I tend to get all consumed by work, I couldn't strike the right balances. And I have a grandchild on the way. I'm very excited about that. My parents were the ultimate grandparents, played huge roles in my kids' lives. I want to do the same. So I kind of put it all together and thought it's not a bad time to go out. Our podcast has done exceptionally well. The book has been number one. Good time to walk away. And there's some educators out there really doing a wonderful job that can easily fill the void. They're sharper than I am, frankly. And I'm really enjoying watching them. And there'll be lots of people doing this type of thing. So I just felt it was a good time. Some of this is a result of my inability to kind of go half in on work. We started the podcast, the social media shorts, the redo of the book, et cetera. I thought, okay, I'll do this 30, 40 hours a week and, kind of blend towards time, but that's just not how I'm wired. You end up kind of throwing yourself back into it. In fact, the book especially was all consuming. And I've realized again, that's who I am. So I'm going to step away now. We'll see what comes. I am asking a lot of questions and speaking to a lot of people about how they transitioned, what they did well, where they went wrong, what's worked for them. The answer, of course, is different for everybody. And it will be for me too. But at least I'm asking the questions now and giving it a lot of thought. My father, I'm giving a long-winded answer. His first year of retirement was horrible. My mother wanted to kill him. She said, I thought we had a good marriage until you came home. And he didn't have anything kind of ready. to go to fill in the time and wanted to hang with her. And she had a life. She was very involved in charity and she had a lot of friendships, etc. But to his credit, he figured it out pretty quickly. And within a year, he was teaching English as a second language, teaching bridge, etc., and then had a very good retirement.
Bridge is the key. My mom is a massive bridge player, and it is the key. It takes time, it's social, it ticks a lot of those retirement boxes. It's not weather dependent, we're in
That's very
Canada,
true.
so weather is a factor. So much about the Wealthy Barber, and I said in the intro, and in full transparency, Dave and I had a chat before this formal interview, and I told him, as I said in the intro, that the Wealthy Barber did change my life. The two things that changed my financial life the most is your book and my dad teaching me about TFSAs, because I read your
It's
book
great.
before TFSAs were a product.
Right.
But really, I think at the heart of the Wealthy Barber, it is about preparing for life transitions, knowing that life and your financial trajectory isn't just like a smooth road. There are bumps along the way. And how do we plan for those things? But I would say that something has changed since 1989, and that is our lifespan. People who are retiring at 65, you're going to be 65 this year when your
I
retirement,
am.
people can very much expect to live in 85, 95. I mean, the fastest growing cohort in Canada are the over 100s. So,
Yeah.
how has the preparation and planning for that longer lifespan, how has it changed, Dave?
Well, it's interesting. The lifespan hasn't increased unbelievably in the last 10 to 20 years. It's certainly gone up, but a lot of the rise you're talking about occurred a while ago, but it is going up. And of course, that means you need more money. It's that simple. There's nothing particularly deep here. And women, of course, need more money than men often because they're living longer than men and all that has to be thought through. I don't know if it changes the planning as much. I think what you're seeing now, and this is a very good thing, is an emphasis on how do you stay healthier for longer during those years. And so it's your health span that's starting to get a lot more attention than just your lifespan. And we're learning more about how the strength of your legs correlates very much to your late life health, to your late life longevity, et cetera. And so all of these things are kind of becoming a part of our knowledge. And I think more people are taking them seriously. People are eating more healthfully later in life, et cetera. But from a financial planning perspective, let's be honest, it makes it harder. We're living longer and longer. You require more money. Often, when you live longer, you're more likely to run into ill health, dementia, mobility issues, meaning you need outside help. Outside help is very expensive. I think probably an even bigger impact trend right now is the baby boomers, of course, are retiring and they're overwhelming the healthcare system and they're overwhelming the long term care system. And we don't really have enough supply in either of those areas to handle all of the demand that we're seeing from this aging population. And so many of my friends, their parents haven't been able to get into long term care or they've opted not to go that route at 78, 82, 84, whatever, but they can't afford the outside help that comes in. It's very expensive. So we've got people taking parents back in to their own home and the challenges that that presents. And so there's no easy answers here. Every family's dealing with these challenges and it's tough. We've dealt with them.
How much are these conversations the ones that you are having with your contemporaries about aging parents, first grandchildren, and your own health span and lifespan? How much is that occupying your time and conversation?
Well, you hear a ton about it, but typically because I'm old, most of my friends are old. In fact, most of my friends are even older than I am. And so you're constantly having discussions about the parents they still have alive, how they're dealing with the different pressures while they're dealing with their own health issues, et cetera. So it's common now to get together. And this is the first part of any conversation is what are you dealing with? And of course, we talked a little bit off air, the shock that a lot of people have when they turn to outside help and they see how expensive it is. So if you're looking at trying to get somebody in 6 hours a day, 12 hours a day, et cetera, and you go, holy smokers. And then some people are saying, I might need 24-hour inside the house help. Well, you start looking at the bills, and most people, of course, can't afford that. It's not a viable option financially. So all of this is interesting. And on our podcast, I've had a lot of the number one, number two, number three retirement specialists in the country. And I brought up the costs of help and assisted living, et cetera. And they said, yeah, but I mean, not everybody needs it. And so do you really want to make a lot of sacrifices? You may not need, and it's all legitimate points. This is how tricky all of this is. But we're
Yeah.
seeing more and more people need it. And again, a lot of it's what I referred to before. We've got so many baby boomers aging, retiring, running into health problems. We're overwhelming our systems to some extent. And we're playing catch up in terms of the number of LTCs we have, the amount of staff, et cetera. But right now, it's a difficult situation.
You mentioned that you're in it yourself. Can you pull back the curtain there a little bit for folks?
Yeah, my father's still alive, and not only that, he's threatening to never die. Yeah, he's let us know that this is a permanent situation. In fact, last Christmas, he told us that we've been a wonderful, loving family, and he's going to miss us all when we're gone. So yes, he is. He is not heading anywhere in his mind, but he's 93 and a half. And, over the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years, really starting when he was 80, he had a bad kidney infection that year, but I think getting worse when he was 85, he's battled some issues as everybody does. Now he's battling some dementia to boot. And so how are you going to handle all that? What are the different routes you can take? So he's been at everything from living on his own with a lot of help from family to unassisted living, but with the meals provided to assisted living, et cetera. And you're navigating all of those waters and you're trying to advocate for him when dealing with the government, when dealing with the different facilities, all of this, and be as supportive as you possibly can. We are in a very lucky position relative to most of my friends that my father is very happy. His disposition has stayed positive the entire time. I think that's one of the things that we found somewhat motivating. I'd like to think as a family, he's been such a wonderful father, grandfather. We would have been there fully regardless. But when somebody's still happy and they're in a good mood and they're fun to be with, obviously it makes it easier to throw yourselves into it. However, you become very aware of just how much work this is. In my case, I've been very lucky because the grandkids have been extremely involved. My son has been the leader of the group and has been very, very loyal to his grandfather and has spearheaded a lot of the visits, the organization, et cetera. Those people that get caught with only one person in the same city as the aging parent or no people, holy smokers. Like I can't imagine. And again, it's stressful. And so I'm very sympathetic to all the people going through this. And again, many of them are dealing with a much worse situation than we are because the person does not have happiness in their life or they're dealing with worse issues.
For the first time in history, we are really faced with retirees taking care of retirees. That
Yeah,
just hasn't been part of
you're
our,
right.
socioeconomic decision making, socioeconomic reality for people. What do you think based on, your 93 and a half-year-old father? I love that we get back to saying halves now. Does that
Yeah.
happen after 90, Dave? Is that the time that we start saying halves again?
He's always done it. So I'm quoting him. Yeah, I'm quoting him, but he's going to make 110, he tells us. And so, and yeah, he's got a very good positive attitude.
How realistic do you think people are? One of the things I said is, I think that Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, alphas, I think that they could find themselves in a position of helping out their parents financially, whether it be them cohabitating, whether it be actual money exchange for parents who haven't planned for these years of care. Do you think that's realistic?
Oh yeah, we're already seeing that to some extent. And unfortunately, you hear about the sandwich generation. We are seeing the squeeze where you've got some parents trying to help out their kids to buy a home because of these runaway real estate prices relative to incomes. And at the same time, they're having to chip in a little bit and help a parent. To your point, the most common way is not by writing a check, but indirectly, you're financially sponsoring them by bringing them into the house, often with grocery expenses and so on and so forth. But again, even when the grandparent, whomever, the 80, the 95-year-old has done a good job with his or her finances, there's still a lot of time involvement. And of course, what I mentioned earlier, if they need outside help coming into the home or even into the assisted living facility, oftentimes an assisted living facility will say, hey, the needs of this person are beyond our capabilities. So yes, we need your 6, 7, 8,000 a month, but you've also got to bring in 12 hours help a day, 24 hours help a day. Well, again, most people can't afford that. It's just not financially doable. So all of these are very, very challenging situations. Every scenario is a little bit different than the one you see before. The number of kids involved, the geographics, the total cost, the wealth of the family, the health of the individual, et cetera. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It's that it's great that we're living longer, but a lot of people are living longer with no quality of life. and a lot of health issues. And it's becoming very, very difficult to balance all of these challenges and to make sure that people aren't being overwhelmed by them. It is not easy. I mean, I'm seeing friends go through it all the time.
How well prepared are people for this? What are the misconceptions? Because I think there's a lot. Like let's just start. I think one of the big misconceptions, especially for Canadians listening to this podcast, which I think are most, um, that it's taken care of with the government. That the government's going to take care of our long-term care needs, and our responsibility will be to visit our loved ones. I think a lot of people think that.
No, I think most people, frankly, think that. And again, as you know, long-term care is not easy to get into. And, we're crowded there, and some people don't find it a desirable option. And therefore, other things have to be done, from assisted living to unassisted living in a facility that provides meals. Sometimes they provide the administration of the medicine, sometimes they don't. And so families have to be involved. And whether it's taking the adult in, now again, if the adult's able to live on his or her own and has no mobility challenges, then we're fine. But as people live to be older and older, almost everybody runs into either cognition issues or mobility issues at some point. All of us do. And so it is very tricky. And you're right. There is a feeling out there that this is taken care of through the government, but there are costs associated with this. The problem is we have to be realistic. Most people can't properly plan for all this financially, also build their own retirement pool. So then now they're helping parents, building their own retirement pool, maybe helping their kids. This is a lot to ask. The basic arithmetic of all this doesn't work. And so I'd love to come on this podcast and say, oh, you don't realize how expensive it is. Here are the 6 things you need to do to prepare. People are going to go, I can't do those. Dave, I'm having trouble doing what you've been preaching for 35 years, save 10%. Okay, so I'm managing to get that done in my group RSP, in my TFSA, et cetera. But now you're saying I need to set aside dramatically more because I may have late life health issues that the government doesn't take care of. Realistically, again, for a lot of people, this is very, very tough. Now, I mentioned the good news earlier. As more people are grasping this, and a lot of the baby boomers that dealt with it with their own parents, and now they're going, holy smokes, I think we will see more emphasis on, I better stay as healthy as I can. We don't have full control over that. Luck plays a lot of a role, environmental issues, things you did as a youth. But how do I at least keep strength up? So I'm going to be a little critical here. By the way, I'm going kind of off the grid here. But one thing I would say to anybody listening who's 50 up, lift weights. And that may be funny advice coming from a financial expert, but I'm telling you, you've got to maintain strength. People know this, but they don't do it. Most of my friends don't even do it. You have to stay in relatively good shape. You need to do squats. You need to get into some sort of routines, et cetera. We've got to push people 50 up, 60 up to do a better job on that front. My father, interestingly, by the way, did do a good job for a long time, but then just stopped and lost the good habits. And of course, once he did, you could see how that played out. Definitely affected leg strength. And leg strength is so, so important as you get older.
One of the things that strikes me hearing you talk about this is your passion and your commitment to encourage people to look at the long game. Look far ahead. That's really what you do in the Wealthy Barber. And I think that that's, even though you're saying, I can't give you all the solutions, but you have to be aware of what the long game is. Is that like something that's like a belly belief for you, Dave?
Well, yeah. I mean, anytime I think if you had any financial expert on the show, they would be thinking, hey, you've got to be careful. You don't just live in the moment exclusively because you have to plan for your future. At some point down the road, you're not going to have work income. So what is going to support you? What other source? Well, you've got to draw from your pool of capital. Yeah, you've got OAS and CPP, et cetera, but you're going to have to create this capital pool. Hopefully you have relatively limited expenses. You've paid off your non-deductible debt. I mean, to some extent, that's what a lot of financial planning is all about, is preparing people for that. And how do you get them thinking? Here's a very positive note. I have noticed for 35 years of doing this, and this sounds like hype, but I've probably seen more financial plans than anybody because people mail them to me nonstop. People who are on top of their finances are actually happier in the moment too. And the biggest misconception in personal finance, the biggest, is I have to make sacrifices today. I'll be a little less happy today in order to be well prepared for my future. It's not that way in real life. In real life, the people who are living within their means today and setting aside the proper amount are happier today too. They're less stressed about their financial future. They'll get caught up in possessions. It's not all about that, et cetera. So those messages are being delivered. There's a lot of wonderful communicators out there. But one of the big points you're trying to bring to light is, correct, this may be even a little harder than we thought. Because as we live longer and longer and longer, not only do we have to have the money to provide income for more years, but there's new costs that are coming into play that we didn't see 20, 40, 60 years ago with, we mentioned assisted living, we mentioned the outside help coming in. And cripe, I wish I had an easy answer for that. I mean, I could look the camera in the eye and say, well, instead of saving 10 to 12%, 10 to 15%, like Dave Chilton says in The Wealthy Barber, let's go to 20 to 22%. And people are going to say, this guy nuts. Does he not see the cost of living right now? So it is a very difficult situation. It's funny, my dad said about 5 years ago, so he's 88 at the time, he said, I really think that financial planning would be better off, society would be better off if we just got rid of everybody when they were 85. They were just gone. And I said, Dad, do you remember you're 88? He goes, yes, but I thought of it first, so I get grandfathered in. But his basic point, even though inappropriate, you can see why he was saying that. If you know how long you're going to live, then financial planning is a lot easier. Also, you know you're not going to run into what could be years and years of the kinds of costs that you're bringing up today. So it is tough. Going back to your point you made 2 questions ago about the number of Canadians who think that this is all going to be kind of handled through, I'll just transition quickly to long-term care. I had a really interesting conversation like that last week with somebody who'd been spending a fair amount and finally said, okay, we're going to go the long-term care route. And like 3 days later, they said, well, this isn't as easy as we thought. Like I could tell right away the mother wasn't going to qualify for long-term care for a while because she's in outstanding health, really. I mean, relative to many other people. So it is a tricky, tricky situation. And again, what happens if we do get some health breakthroughs that lead to people living even longer, but not necessarily healthier? That could be a doubling of this very, very troubling situation.
Without question, that is on our doorstep. Without question. I mean, Dr. Brian Goldman, who's been on the podcast and
Right.
who's so wonderful, he says, we're 5 years away from everybody having their own ultrasound machine at home and being able to
Yeah.
say, what's this, what's that, plug it into your smartphone and being able to self-diagnose. Those diagnostic tools are going to be in our households before we know it. You know, mentioning that idea of, being passionate about people looking at that long game. One of the things that I'm super passionate about and really one of the reasons that I began this podcast is about communication, talking about
Right.
things. That if we talk about things, they're real, firstly, and secondly, we can actually make some progress in how we are planning. We can't, put the blinders on to what's possibly in our future. So combining my passion for communication and your passion for the long game, what are the conversations that families can be having around finances and lifespan?
Well, I think in general, around estate planning and late life planning, we're doing a horrible job of having those conversations. And, I did some work 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago with Royal Trust, where I produced a lot of videos on estate planning and put them out there, kind of sharing advice, but more importantly, explaining different concepts, et cetera. Right. I learned 10 times more from the feedback to those videos than I had known ahead of time because people just kept reaching out saying, here's the mistakes we made. Here's problems our family has run into. And to your point, not all of them, but a good percentage of them could have been solved or at least dramatically lessened through open communication among the family members ahead of time. And it's something that now suddenly we're seeing a lot of experts, people like you, shining a light on. And I think it will improve, but we need to get moving on this front. And you need, and I mean, yes, of course you have to have an updated will. Of course you have to have updated powers of attorney. A lot of people like Dave Chilton hit that theme over and over and over again, especially powers of attorney, where I see so many mistakes being made. But you need to be sitting down with your family, talking about your late life hopes, talking about what you'd like to do in the living front, where your finances are now, because to some extent, it all becomes a pool of capital late life that has to be drawn upon. What's the most efficient way to do it from a tax perspective? What's the least risky way to do it from a running out of money perspective? Will the kids have to be involved? All of this needs to be looked at and understood by the family ahead of time. And it does require some openness. And, for the most part, and this is a very encouraging note for those of you listening, those conversations are not nearly as awkward as for some reason people assume they're going to be.
I agree completely and totally.
Yeah, and they go well. I mean, people tend to have them and people, yeah, okay, good. Thank you for sharing that and all these types of things. And, lately we've had some people, Brian Calm Money. I really like that guy on social media. And others have been talking about how you have to have this book prepared for when I die.
Yeah.
And it's got a list of all your assets. If you have liabilities, your liabilities, the needed details around all of these things, your hopes, your dreams, your wishes. And then your executor can step in and really be able to manage your affairs post death a lot better, a lot more efficiently. But what's interesting is taking that same book and showing it to family members before you die can be a fantastic move too. Now, okay, this is your current financial situation. This is what you're hoping plays out late life, what you're hoping plays out post death. Again, it's all about just being open, communicating. And when you're open, by the way, a lot of times a family member will say, that doesn't really work for me. Okay. So one of the things you're hoping for is unlikely. So, for example, you're hoping maybe later in life to go to assisted living or to unassisted living, and we'll come over a lot, help out groceries. But we're thinking of living in Florida 6 months a year. And that one, by the way, is one we've seen many times. And it's okay, that has to be factored into play. Well, those things get forgotten easily if you're not communicating. So you hammering away at people being more open about this, having these discussions is important. But one of the reasons it's happening because the baby boomers are going through it. There's so many people going through it now. They're saying, hey, we probably should be talking about this more. And I think that will improve.
And I think two things. I think that expectations come out with those conversations like what you just mentioned. "Oh, I thought you would be able to bring me groceries once a week." "Well, I'm gonna be in Florida 6 months out of the year." When my mom
Right.
and dad moved from Brampton, which is 45 minutes away from me, and they moved to Thornbury and then Meaford, and I lost my mind because I was like, how am I gonna be taking care of you?" I was, working
Yeah.
in morning television at the time, and they were like, "We don't expect that of you. We don't want
Yes.
that from you." And so I had that expectation that they didn't have. So it allows for real conversation about real life choices. And, for everybody listening, I think Dave and I both want to have a little disclaimer. And I think Dave's done a great job of saying every situation is unique
So
and you
different.
can't plan for everything. And we understand the restraints, but you can start with conversation.
Hey, can I make a very important point just to drive home what you said about every situation so different? I've been asked thousands of times, why did you never write a book, The Retiring Barber or The Aging Barber? And it's precisely because of what you said. When people are 20 to 45, I can be somewhat prescriptive. Here are the 4 or 5 things you should be doing. Yeah, here are nuances, here are exceptions, et cetera. But here's the basic thinking. Every situation is so different for a 65, 75, 85-year-old. There's so many moving parts, so many sources of income, so many family issues, challenges, positives, et cetera, that you can't cover off all the nuances, all those types of things. That format, using the story format with 3, 4 characters wouldn't work for that particular audience very effectively. There's better ways to get at the subject matter. This just jumped to mind, by the way. We're talking about those conversations. Twice in the last few weeks, I've had people say to me, we're late life. We're 75, but we're in good health. We think we've got lots of years of good health. Don't know that for sure, but we're confident. We really want a dog. We love dogs, but obviously getting a dog at our age is a bit of a risk. So what they've done is they've gone and talked to family members and made sure that if they can't keep the dog, if something jumps up and bites them, pardon the pun, that they're going to be able to move the dog over and the kids in the 40s and 50s will be happy to have it. And they have those conversations. In both cases, they got positive responses. They said, absolutely, we don't have a dog, but we would be open to taking over your dog X years down the road, et cetera. That may sound like a small thing to a lot of your listeners. That's the kind of thing you need to talk through. And if you don't, what happens is people don't want to give up the pet. And so let's say they don't have a kid who will take the pet. They don't want to give it up. So then they end up staying in the home too long when they're falling, et cetera. All of these things, like it's tough. I mean, I don't know how, do you have parents who are still alive and well?
Well, I was gonna say, did you, do some creeping on my mom's social media? So my mom is still with us. She's 81. My dad died the reason for this podcast is my dad got sick the end of 2023, and he died August 1st of 2024.
Oh,
And
yes.
helping my mom caregive for my dad. My mom's a retired nurse. She's a medical professional. I had every advantage known to anyone on the face of the planet, and I still found it really, really opaque and challenging. And if I'm having problems getting information, Dave, I'm a bit of a bulldozer when it comes to things, especially my parents. And so I still have my mom, but my dad is very much the inspiration for this entire podcast and learning. And he would lose his mind wherever he is right now. He's losing his mind that I'm talking to you. He's the one that bought me your book,
Oh, great.
and he did teach me TFSAs. But my parents got a dog, Jake, Australian Labradoodle, when my parents were 76 years old. My dad died
Interesting.
when he was 79, but I'll tell you, that dog brought so much joy to my dad in
Agree.
the last 3 years of his life. My mom still takes care of Jake, and she gets her 10,000 steps in every single day because of that dog. Jake also has a great life. He goes to a farm and plays twice a week. He lives in Meaford. His life is great. But that dog, many people raised eyebrows, myself included. Um, but I'm telling you, that dog brought a lot of joy. I love that you bring up, I think that both you and I are very lucky that we come from families and we're in families that are close and able to have those conversations. So that's the lens with which we both see things. And I get some feedback from people saying to me, "But what about, caring for a parent who's been abusive? Or what about in a family that my dad or somebody was an alcoholic and spent all the money? How do you deal with those challenging situations?" You had to have come across people who don't have the same dynamic as you have with your dad and your children. How do you have those conversations with people who are in different emotional situations with their loved ones?
Again, every situation is so different, but sadly, that's more the norm than our situations. I mean, there's just so many strained relationships between kids and their parents. You see it all the time. And you mentioned the number one cause is addiction. Often addiction that leads to abuse, but addiction on its own can be so problematic. We're even seeing a lot more late life addictions than I've ever seen, to gambling, to drinking too much. People are picking up these addictions in their 50s and 60s and early 70s. And some people say that COVID jumped that a little bit, but I'm not sure. I saw the trend, frankly, before COVID that was very worrisome on this front. Hey, let's not be naive here. That's a lot more challenging situation. You're right. I'm blessed. You're blessed to have great relationships with parents, and that makes the open dialogue easier, but it also makes caring easier. It makes finding the energy to visit that often, to be that bull that you talked about that's advocating for the parent. Obviously, it's easier to do when the parent's been wonderfully generous and kind and helpful and lifting to you. When you've had a strained relationship or somebody's been abusive towards you or even apathetic towards you, that is tough. And I don't have any easy answers. That's, very complex psychology. And I'm seeing lots of people in my life who've had to go through just that and deal with somebody who's an addict and then help them to still manage all of these late life challenges. And you mentioned the word bull. You have to advocate for your parents in many instances. You really do. And we had to deal with the government authorities as they kind of helped you to navigate the waters. By the way, they were phenomenal. Everybody loves to take shots at the government workers, et cetera. Everybody we dealt with was fantastic. They were very courteous. They were very good at explaining the challenges, the ins, the outs, what you had to watch out for. And I mean, one of the things that interesting to me is by nature, we're a very polite family, and everybody on our end was very understanding of the fact the system is overwhelmed. You couldn't get back to us yesterday about this. We understand my dad's probably not qualifying for that. And I think being calm, being polite at all times probably helped the relationships too and made it more likely they were going to be helpful to us. Not put us ahead of anybody, but always be courteous and responsive to us.
Just so I understand, and so people listening understand, what was the system that you were in? Is that getting your dad into a long-term care facility? Is that the path that you were on with him?
Yeah, working on all of that, getting long-term care. He moved from unassisted living to assisted living and figuring out which of the facilities was the right match for him. And then when he got in there, do you use the facilities doctors? Do you keep his own personal doctor? And then, of course, the facility said, hey, your dad's running into some challenges now. We need you to get some outside help in. And so some of that could be government sponsored. A lot of it's going to be on your own dime, figuring out where that break comes. How do you even calculate all of that? And who makes those decisions? What groups are you dealing with? I'm telling you, there's a lot. And again, you're right. So many people have this naive feeling that this is just okay. The government's going to take care of this in some way, shape, or form, or the people are going to transition from, oh, I'm living on my own to all of a sudden I'm living in long term care. It doesn't work that way. Nobody's transition tends to go that smoothly and in that one step process. It's a journey. It really is a journey full of ups and downs.
much were you prepared? Like, how much do you think people actually know about this?
Very little. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mentioned earlier, I find even some of the financial experts aren't understanding yet of the percentages of people who are now dealing with this. So their feeling is, yeah, there's a small risk. This could get quite expensive late in life. Well, I would argue, based on the anecdotal evidence I'm seeing from my large group of friends, it's not a small risk. It's a fairly significant risk. Now, what percentage I would put on it, I don't have a number, but it's not a small one. So I would say most people aren't prepared. They're not that knowledgeable. We weren't either, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, oh, look at us, how smart we were. But my son, again, kind of driving the process of being very caring, being involved, organizing us all really helped. And then when I realized it was complicated because I like studying things, then I threw myself into it. And then I visited a number of facilities, tried to talk to a lot of friends who'd already been through it, reached out and got everything from old fashioned pamphlets to the online websites you have to go through. And it all starts fitting together a little bit better. But I like doing that kind of thing. And most people don't. And so they don't want to wade through it. And the other thing is, I don't mind advocating. Like, I don't mind being the bull, although I tend to do it in a very soft sell, polite way. Somebody's got to be willing to pick up the phone and represent the parents and make sure they're on the most efficient track, the best track for them. A lot of people aren't comfortable playing that role. I get that. They're very introverted. They've not had to do that in their career. I mean, I've been in a career where by nature of being an entrepreneur, you tend to sell. And so that was a little easier role for me. It's amazing, by the way, and you know this better than anybody, how different parts of the family are very comfortable with a lot of this and other people in the family are extremely uncomfortable with it. And it's not that they're not caring. And you have to be very careful when you're going through this to remind yourself, okay, that person's not that involved, but it's not that they don't care. You can see that they do. You can hear the passion in their voice, but for whatever reason, they can't harness that care and turn it into action to the same way other people can.
One of the things that I had, and I think you had also, was some time.
Right.
You know, I'm not in the sandwich generation. I'm not caring for any young people now. I had a real flexibility of work schedule to be able to do this. And this is the other big aspect for people to be able to have the conversations now so that they're not making decisions in a crisis and when they're already compromised by time. That's one of the big, big things that got me through my situation was the flexibility of time.
No, you're bang on. I mean, I'm still working until the end of the year, but I don't do a lot of socializing, so that frees up more time than most. And you're right. I mean, different siblings. We've been lucky in our family. Everybody's contributed. Everybody's been a part of the process. Everybody communicates quite effectively. But certainly, in many of the examples I see, you often have one of the kids driving the bus and one or two not being as involved as probably they should be. In fact, some are fairly good at just kind of isolating away and blocking this out of their mind. I know that some of the research says it's more likely to be a male not do his fair share. I don't know if that's fair to men or not, but that's what the research has said over the years. But no, you're making a lot of good points. And you can see you're on the front line talking to a lot of people about what they're up against. But you mentioned that if you wait to learn right until the time of crisis, that you could be too busy. But the other thing is you're emotionally involved then. You're tired, you're stressed when some of these things are going on. And for example, when my dad was in the assisted living facility and things started going poorly and you needed to get in outside help and make some big decisions, et cetera, you want to have that research beforehand. You don't want to be making those judgment calls in a snap way. You want to have thought through, okay, what are the costs of this, the upside, the downside, the alternatives, et cetera. Plus, again, you're learning that and kind of thinking it through when you're less emotionally involved. But don't mistake that. You're never not emotionally involved. I mean, this is your parent you're talking about. I mean, you're always tied into the situation. I can see the love you have for your father to this day, and he's passed on. I mean, that's the way it should be. And so, yeah, this is all very, very tricky stuff. And, to the point of what you said right out of the gate, it's getting trickier because we're living longer. And, there's a lot of unhealthy old people out there now.
Do your squats, people, as Dave says. Not only financial advice here, we got some exercise advice.
Well, you mentioned something interesting about the dog, because this is so true about a lot of the people that get their dog, not at 83, 84, but like, let's say 70, 72, or kind of the age that your parents did. It gets you walking and it gets you outside. It gets you up. Man, those are invaluable. Just getting outside and taking the 10,000 steps your mother's doing. Think about that. And then the dog has added companionship, love, joy, unconditional. I mean, come on. It doesn't really get a whole lot better than that. Now, there are downsides too. to the dog. My dog's crazy. And so there's challenges with all of this, but it's a net positive for a lot of people, not everybody. You just have to think it all through.
And I'm going to add one more thing. And you've given me many tips in terms of I got to get to the gym this afternoon. But also, you say you don't socialize very much. You're going to have to amp up that aspect of your life because now, in the world of, conversations about seniors and what's necessary, is, how they say we need like 15 hours of exercise a week or whatever that number
Yes.
is? They now say we also need 3 hours of socialization outside of our family per week.
Right. Yeah, and I'm surprised it's that low, to be honest. I would think it would be even higher. And the research that's very clear is that the people who socialize most tend to be the happiest people. Now, again, cause and effect here. Maybe they're socializing because they're happy. And again, causation, et cetera, all those things have to be thought through. But yes, certainly in a retirement, you need connection. And I mean, you need to fill your time too. And one of the best ways to do that is being involved with friends and conversation. And I'll do a better and better job of that. A lot of the reasons that I don't socialize now as much as I probably should is because I've always been a hard worker. I've enjoyed work and I've got a lot of my fun out of that. And so I've gone that route. But yeah, that's going to be a big adjustment at the end of the year, no question about it. And I'm also a big, big supporter of what you talked about, getting outside. You got to get outside, getting a little sunlight, getting fresh air, clearing your mind. All of those things are so important. Kind of getting trapped inside is the worst thing you can do. My parents were very good at both of these things. My mother died at about age 82, I think, but she stayed in good shape right till she died. She was strong and she kept working out, kept getting outside. All of these things are so, so important. Mobility is everything. And again, leg strength, they're proving is absolutely crucial.
A lot of people, majority of people, their personal wealth is sitting in their home, their real estate, their primary residence. And we also know that the vast majority of Canadians want to age in place. The number is extraordinary. 96% of Canadians over the age of 65 say they want to age in place. What are the challenges there as you see it, with majority of our money being in our real estate if we own a home, and the fact that we want to stay in that home so the money's tied up?
It is. I mean, you can gain access to it. You could use a line of credit. You can use reverse mortgages. They obviously have downside risk. You're turning compounding, what should be your strongest ally, into a foe, et cetera. I don't think nearly that percentage will, in fact, age in place. I mean, over time, people tend to move from their home because they have trouble maintaining it. Oftentimes, it provides too much space. The costs are too high. They do want the capital. They want to free it up to invest or free it up to spend. But again, they can also drop their monthly costs sometimes by moving, not always, but I mean, in fact, I laugh at a lot of the people I've watched so-called move down over the years because the move down has been to a slightly smaller place, but it's been so nice that they actually haven't freed up any capital. I've seen that over and over again. But in fact, I'm really going on here, but it's really funny. I've had friends who, instead of moving down, have put in swimming pools because they want the grandkids to come over more. So it's been a quasi move up because they've added things. But at some point, it gets tough to maintain a home. Here's a point that I find interesting. I still live in my own home, by the way, so I'm not pushing any a direction here. You have to make your own call. But I have noticed over and over again, a lot of my friends who have not wanted to move from their home. I want to age in place. I want to stay here. I'm comfortable here. I like my neighbors. I like the lifestyle. I like everything about it. Then they've moved. They've moved to a condo. They've moved to a rental unit, whatever. And they said a year later, I wish I would have done that sooner. They like the lower hassle factor. They're not taking care of their lawn. Now, some people enjoy doing that, but I would say more than half the people have said, you know what? I might have been wrong about that. I've actually kind of liked the simpler lifestyle, liked having less space. So for those of you who say there's no way I'm going to like it, I've met a lot of other people say that and they've gone the other direction. Sometimes it's tough to know in life what we're going to like until we experience it.
It's very good advice. The two tenets of the Wealthy Barber: pay yourself first and the 10% rules. Are there any philosophies, do you think, Dave, that people can employ once they've done those two things through their retirement?
We had Rob Engen on our podcast a while ago saying that a lot of his clients, the mistake they're making is they won't spend. They spent their whole life as savers and they can't flip that switch now and take that good pool of capital they built up through following kinds of wealthy barber techniques and have fun with it and go on those trips because they worry so much. So every situation is different. Some people hear that and they're envious going, definitely don't have enough to worry about, that type of thing. So everybody's different, but I'm going to give you a different piece of advice. It doesn't have anything to do with finance. I look at my friends who are retired. And I say, okay, who is really prospering? Who's really enjoying retirement, thriving? It truly is their golden years. And what are the common denominators? And I'll tell you one that interests me. The people who are loving it are still trying to improve in certain areas in their life. So they're getting involved, yes, in the community. They're playing bridge, as we talked about earlier. They're doing their travel, but there's 2 or 3 things in their life. They're saying, I want to keep getting better because so much of the joy in life comes from getting better. So they're picking up a language. They're trying not just to golf, but to get better at golf. They're actually taking it fairly seriously. They're taking lessons. I'll tell you a quick story you get a kick out of. This is not that long ago, 7, 8 years ago. My father says to us, I'm going to take chipping lessons. This is a guy who hadn't golfed in 10 years. He was not particularly mobile. He couldn't swing a club. I said, why would you take chipping lessons? You don't golf. I was watching Jason Day chip, and I like the way he chips with his hands forward. I'm going to take chipping lessons because I've always been a bad chipper. I do not want to die a bad chipper. Now, this guy has the right attitude. He went out trying to improve a chipping, a skill he wasn't even going to put to use, but that was important to him. He stayed that way, by the way, on many fronts, trying to always stay on top of his language ability, Spanish, French, etc., stay up on all of the news, etc., just keep growing his mind. But I have seen that with friend after friend. If they're trying to grow still, if they're trying to push themselves, they tend to be happier in retirement. So not a financial tip, but one that I'm a big believer in.
I'll tell you, Dave, one of the reasons for your success, I honestly believe, is not just because The Wealthy Barber gives such great financial advice, but also because it is a book that is about enjoyment of life and participating in life at its fullest. And I think that that's where that advice comes from in you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
No, I enjoyed it today. It was a lot of fun. And I still laugh at the questions you sent me. You said, here's the questions we're going to go through. And I thought that would be about a 12-day conversation. I'm going to have to move to Toronto and we're just going to put out a long series of podcasts. No, that was a lot of fun today. Continued success with the podcast. I hope it goes well for you.
Great. Good luck with your dad. Good luck with that upcoming grandchild. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time in your life. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
As you can tell, I am a huge Dave Chilton fan. And truly, 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 The Wealthy Barber changed my life. It's also a fave grad gift for friends, kids, and my own nephews. I am so thankful to Dave for being here today and to our sponsor, RBC Wealth Management. Thanks to my co-producers from 6 of 1 Digital, Carrie and Jess. And thanks to you for following wherever you are listening and for finding us on socials at The Heart of It All Pod. We will be back next Tuesday with a brand new episode. Until then, please take care.